Hey guys, Linux sucks, or at least it does for the new user. A lot of Linux personalities, a lot of Linux writers, Linux YouTubers, they've made videos on Linux sucks. They've written articles and blog posts about how Linux sucks. And I've had a lot of my channel viewers ask me to make my own personal Linux sucks video. Well, I'm going to do a little bit of a different take on it. I'm going to do Linux sucks for new users, because that's the angle I want to attack this. It's not going to be a rather lengthy Linux sucks video, because quite frankly, I don't think Linux sucks. I think Linux is the greatest operating system known to man. So much better than all the alternatives. But there are some areas that need to be improved on, especially coming from a new user standpoint. So let's get started. Reason number one Linux sucks for new users is it is overly complicated and complex. Compared to Windows and Mac OS X, Linux is complicated. The jargon we use, the fact that we tend to do everything in the terminal for the most part, especially from support aspects, we're always giving people terminal commands. This kind of stuff scares away new users when you start talking about the terminal and the shell and sudo apt this and sudo pacman that. You know, that just scares the heck out of new users. So one thing that is a little bit different than Windows and Mac OS X, one of the things is this initial learning curve. You know, these people, for the most part, if you've been running Windows, you've run Windows your entire life. All you know is the Windows jargon, the Windows hierarchy structure, you know, the directory structure, you know, how to run, you know, like a Windows executable, how to install Windows software. When you first come to Linux as a brand new user, of course, you know nothing. And then when you hear these people talk and these overly complicated terms, you know, a lot of the Linux jargon, it can be a little frightening. And going a step further on, it's complicated and complex, the install process. For the most part, 99% of us that are going to use Linux for the first time are going to have to install Linux ourselves. You are not going to go to a store and find Linux on a desktop or a laptop, you know, at your local Best Buy. So you're going to have to install it yourself. For the general population, for like the masses, 99% of them, when you tell them to go to a website, you give them a web address, they need to download the ISO, then they need to create a bootable USB stick. Wow, their eyes are already glazing over, even though nothing I just said is difficult. Already you are scaring off most people that are potential Linux users. They're not going to install their own operating system. They're not downloading ISO. They're not making a bootable thumb drive or a bootable DVD. And then no matter how easy the installer, such as Ubuntu's Ubiquity installer, that basically you click OK 3 times and you're done in about 15 minutes. Still, for your average Linux user, like, you know, your mom, your grandmom, they're not doing that. There's no way they're going to go through the trouble of that. They want to go to a store, you know, pay $400 for some cheap laptop. It already has Windows installed. Until we get to that point, for most of the population, they're never going to run Linux. And the second thing that is really scary to Linux newcomers, why Linux sucks for the new user, is too many choices. There are hundreds, maybe thousands of Linux distributions out there. It's hard to say. We know that there are well over 300 Linux distributions currently listed on distrowatch.com. Which distro should I install? That's the first thing every new Linux user has to decide. What Linux distro should I install? There's no good answer to that. There's no right answer or wrong answer to that for the most part. Going a step further with the too many choices is, other than the distros, too many desktop environments. I mean, what do you want to go with? GNOME, KDE, Cinnamon, Mate, Unity, XFCE, LXDE, LXQT, Pantheon. What am I missing? There's so many. I probably can't even think of all the full desktop environments out there. Deepin, Trinity, Budgie, and then we haven't talked about all the applications, the suite of applications that are available in Linux. How many different audio players do we have? Different video players. It's not like you don't have a ton of software available in Windows, but for the really big stuff, you're not going to change window managers in Windows. You're not going to change desktop environments. The UI, for the most part, it's locked down. You have no choice. You are presented with something. That is all you get. All of a sudden, now that you've come to freedom here in Linux, and you're presented with all these choices, it's overwhelming. First of all, the new Linux user doesn't even know what a desktop environment or a window manager is. They don't even know what a Linux distribution is. To be honest, does anybody really know exactly what a Linux distribution is when you first come to Linux? No, you have no idea what that even means, Linux distribution. So, all the choices, that's scary for the new Linux user. That's one reason why Linux sucks for the new user. The third reason I think Linux sucks for the new user is it's ever-changing. Constant changing. Nothing stays the same ever in Linux. Nothing is ever good enough. I think back to my early days in Linux, the GNOME 2 desktop environment. Everybody thought that thing was just the greatest desktop environment. It was good looking, fast, really polished, professional. It just blew Windows out of the water. Whatever particular version of Windows might have been around in some of those GNOME 2 days, I think that was during the XP and later the Vista days. Man, GNOME 2 was just such a great desktop environment. And then the GNOME developers, once it got to a point where that thing was just so good and everybody loved it and revered it, they killed it and went to GNOME 3, which everybody hated. Same thing with KDE. Everybody loved KDE 3. KDE 4 comes out. Same thing that's happening with our display server. We've been running Xorg forever, the X11 server. Now, Wayland's come along. Is there going to be breakages along the way? Probably. Linux is all about change. Ever constant changes. So that is not something, again, that the new Linux user, that user coming from Windows and Mac, they've never experienced anything like that. It's completely foreign to them. That whole idea of everything's constantly changing. Don't ever get comfortable with your desktop environment, your window manager, your display server, your init system. In Linux, tomorrow it could be something different. And the fourth and final reason that Linux sucks for the new user, at least on this short video, support for Linux. Now, the support community for Linux is outstanding. The problem with the support community for Linux is it is almost entirely online. You have to go online to forums, Stack Exchanges, IRC chat channels, mailing lists. With Windows, you need support for a Windows machine. What did you do? You called one of your relatives or your best buddy that knows a little bit about computers, and you asked them about your Windows problems. Maybe they came over and fixed the problem for you. Chances are you are not going to have that best friend or that guy at work or your third cousin, that knows a little bit about computers. They're not going to know anything about Linux. They're not running Ubuntu or Fedora or anything like that. No, they're running Windows 10. So, that's a barrier to entry for new users is the support aspect. You have to deal with the online support aspect of Linux, which is great for the most part, but because it's done online, you do have some real jerks, some real jackasses on these Linux forums and chat channels and mailing lists sometimes. Occasionally you get this less than helpful response from certain people in these Linux support channels. Again, because it's online, it's easy to be that way. Nobody is this way, of course, when you're dealing with somebody face to face. So that is my fourth reason why Linux sucks for the new users. And just briefly, I will mention for this video, I have this wallpaper up here, this really neat DistroTube wallpaper. This wallpaper actually was created by one of the channel viewers and channel sponsors here, Karl Schneider. I hope I pronounced his last name right, Schneider. But Karl, you guys know Karl. He hangs out a lot in various Linux YouTube channels. He follows a lot of us. He occasionally joins the Big Daddy Linux Live podcast. Karl is an outstanding graphical artist, graphic designer. He does some amazing work. You guys really need to check out his DeviantArt page. I'm going to link to his DeviantArt page in the description. He's also on Google+. I'll link his Google+ account. So you guys, especially you guys that are doing free and open source projects, I mean, he does a lot of artwork for a ton of different Linux distributions and other free and open source projects. Karl is a great guy too. So you guys that are interested in that wallpaper that I'm showing here, check my Facebook page. I posted links to 3 different wallpapers Karl created here for me. So again, I'll put that in the description. So that is basically wraps up Linux sucks for the new user. Peace, guys.